some of these promoters are saying, like, how do we get rid of Vince McMahon? How do we get rid of Junior? And I'm sure that I don't think anybody went to the point like, let's get a hitman or something, but they would have loved to have seen him have the brakes fail going down the hill somewhere.
It's the golden age of WWE. Larger than life of fantasy. Step in the ring, feel history. Welcome to the golden WWE.
From Sterling Golden to Thunderlips, we're talking about the rise of Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania right here on Primetime with Sean Mooney. Sean, how you doing today?
I am doing tremendously, Steve, especially since I'm really anxious to talk about this topic. Because honestly, when you talk about professional wrestling, the rise of professional wrestling, the heights that it reached, that conversation does not start without Hulk Hogan. And, love him or hate him, as people always say all this, we'll get into it. But there is no doubt that there's no way we wouldn't be probably having a conversation right now if it wasn't for Hulk Hogan, who blazed that trail for every professional wrestler at the time and beyond, and changed that industry forever. So, I'm really anxious to talk about this and dive into it because Hulk Hogan is just a figure that not just in professional wrestling, in sports entertainment and entertainment. I mean, how many people can say, he was the only professional wrestler who ever appeared on Sports Illustrated, and on and on and on. So, yeah, this is a great topic, and I'm glad we're doing it.
And you read his book. I see it behind you. And what do you think of the book? Because there are a few books out there, and that's why today I really want to dive into the beginning and the rise, because there's a lot of stories out there involving Elvis or the Beatles and broken legs and all these types of scenarios. In that book, what did you get from it? You felt like, okay, these seems like facts to me?
Yeah, well, it is, it's basically titled My Life Beyond Outside of the Ring. And he gets into a lot of his personal life, and which was an interesting side to learn about from his words. But it does dive in pretty deep in the beginning and how he grew up. There's other great books that detail more of the professional wrestling, and I've read them as well. But this one is a good one because he really does talk about those early years, which we're going to do today. We're going to take this piece by piece. Yes. So a lot of the book is his later years, kind of after he's out of the ring, and that we'll talk about that at some point.
Yes.
But right now, boy, you talk about where he started, and it is really a fascinating story. And persistence, I think, is the greatest word here.
Well, it's interesting because how big he is, how strong he looks. He's a bass player in a band at the other place in Tampa. He's introduced to Jack Briscoe. Eddie Graham gets involved. He's trained. And one of the biggest stories, I think, the earliest story ever I've heard about Hulk Hogan is his training to become a professional wrestler and his leg being broken by everyone who's training him, Matsuda. Now, so many people have different stories about this because some people go, oh, I don't believe it. But Jack Briscoe confirms it. Brian Blair says he's in the room. He confirms it. He's obviously gone for months and months and months from training. So let's start there because Hulk Hogan is known as a storyteller and an entertainer. This broken leg situation, do you believe it happened? I do, but at the same time, there's a lot of naysayers out there.
No, I do. I believe it. And like you said, this book is in his words. So I take at it face value of what he recounts. And you do have other people that, you're not going to go hobble around without a broken leg for months and then return to a place where it all started. But I think we need to back up a little bit even before we get to that incident, because you've heard, and I've had many conversations with professional wrestlers over the years, and they talk about, their early beginnings. And time you hear again how it was basically a rite of passage to try and break through that door. You were always tested in some cases beyond belief to find out how bad he wanted to be a part of this business from, talking about, they say stretching somebody. So some Yahoo decides that he wants to be a wrestler, and he shows up at one of these schools, doesn't have a clue about the business, thinks in many cases they think it's a shoot because they're not smart to the business in any way. And really the idea of it is you make it so difficult for them, especially when we're talking about those kayfabe days, because it was a protected, brotherhood, very much. And so when people would show up, it was like, you got to earn your way in here, and we don't want you here. It wasn't even, let's test them. It was, we don't want you here. And you'd think, if people know the story, they say, okay, Hulk shows up, they want to test him, they, break his leg, and he comes back, and then it all begins. And according to Terry, that's not what happened. He had this natural size, so he was this big giant guy, and got into weightlifting, and had seen people like superstar Billy Graham and seeing like, wow. And so he decides that this is what he wants to do. And the way he explains it, there was nothing that was going to stop him, to where the point where he would go to I think they had matches, every Tuesday night or something like that at the Sportatorium. He would just show up and just hang out, just to try and get near these guys and try and talk to anybody. And, finally, I think it was Graham, what's his first name?
Eddie Graham.
Eddie Graham. And he sees this kid keep hanging around, and they just are sick of him. And he says to them, oh, so you want to be a wrestler? Well, show up at this place, which was Matsuda's. And he goes there, and with the idea, at least from Graham and them, to get rid of this guy. Whatever you got to do, make it happen. Who knows how that really happened? Was that something that they did? But apparently during that first session, Matsuda breaks his leg. And, Hulk goes away, Terry goes away, and undeterred, he gets better, and he, was more than anything. It's like, I got to prove to these people I'm not going to give up. And he shows up, and they're like, what the hell? This guy, and he eventually starts training him. But Terry goes on in this book anyway, talking about how it went way beyond that. Even when he hung around with Matsuda training him, and he was getting better and better, but he said he never let him be in matches, never let him, really do anything. And then when they did, and when he had his big opportunity, they humiliated him in a match. And it was kind of, then he goes, when I go backstage and everybody's, back in the arena, everybody's like, big laugh, ha, 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 and kind of like, hey, pal, now you're in. And he's still kind of aware, like, Jesus, that's what this is. Like, I don't know if I want to be a part of this after all of that.
Right.
But he's in, he had given up doing the band thing, which was a pretty good gig that he had going with the band Ruckus, I think it was called. But that's when he started to realize that he knew how to read crowds doing that. Yeah. By doing it. He was a bass player, played guitar, but he also ended up, it's kind of like, there's always that guy in the band. Oh yeah, somebody's got to play bass, and he's
he's the guy.
Okay. But here he is, a bass player, and he's like the front man, for the band. So he's already realizing that he's got this power. He doesn't know how to harness it. He doesn't know what to do with it, but he knows he's got it, whatever it is. And he's at this point, like, I'm in, oh, great. And then it goes on where he does start doing matches and stuff, but he's basically, he's the gopher boy. He's driving, they make him drive everywhere. They give him crap everywhere. He's got to go get beer for them so they can drink in the back of the thing. And gets to the point, he's like, well, screw this. I'm not going to, and he goes to other territories.
Yeah.
And in the meantime of that, he hooks up with Brutus, and Brutus is another big guy, just like weightlifting, and didn't really knew nothing about wrestling. And Terry kind of starts training him and gets him going, and then they become the tag team, and they start traveling around in this van, and that's where it really started to happen, because once he got going and started to realize that crowds were reacting to him, and just from this natural ability, that this power that he had, that he's still learning how to harness. It's just just amazing. Well, like I said at the top of this, from persistence, like, my God, how many people would have done that? And believe me, there's certainly others in the professional wrestling world who did, but if all this, in accordance to what Terry said happened, it took him years at that point. Hulkamania didn't happen overnight, and he was not welcomed into this business. He was a joke to them. This big, giant, gawky bird guy with the blonde hair and all the tan and the muscles. And in the meantime, he's just working it and getting better and better and better. And then people start taking notice, because he's walking into these arenas, and then people are coming back, and he's building crowds. That's when they start taking notice. But I think that Terry never forgot that, and the way he was treated when he came in, and rightly so. And when he had that power, there's probably that feeling of, okay, I remember what you treated me like back then. And he became good friends with a lot of these guys, but I don't think he ever let that go. And I think it was another thing that drove him throughout his career, of what price he paid and how badly he wanted it to reach the heights that he did. But the very beginning of it, just is an incredible story, because nobody wanted him in the business. It wasn't like they saw this guy like, here he is, he's arrived.
The one's here.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting you say that, because you bring up having to pay his dues, driving around. The boys are in the back drinking. He's driving from town to town. People don't think of Hulk Hogan when they think of that. They think like he just showed up. Look at him. He's so big. He's so strong. Yeah. He must have been the world champion the day of. No, it took him like 10 years in the business to become this rise of Hulkamania, this Hulk Hogan character that we all know and love. So it's interesting to see that everyone pays their dues, but I think a lot of fans forget that you don't become somebody without starting off as nobody. And so he had to grow up and become that man. But you brought it up. Bruce the Barber Beefcake, they make a friendship. The Boulder Brothers. Mm-hmm. And you're right about that. When Hogan finds someone and that person treats him with respect and he treats him with respect, suddenly you have noticed over the decades and decades, the friendships carry on. Jimmy Hart, Bruce Beefcake, the Nasty Boys. It's there. You see it. But him becoming friends with Brutus right in 1978, they were friends until the end. Of course, everyone has rocky relationships and friendship, but it's interesting to think that the Boulder Brothers together, what do you think of that? Because eventually they still team up together in the WWF.
Yeah, and Brutus has a book. It's back there too that I've read, and I had several conversations with Ed over the years. It's been a few since we chatted, but his story is a really interesting one as well. As I mentioned, that he knew nothing about wrestling. He just he liked weightlifting. He loved the look. It was kind of they were very popular with the girls with the way they're big guys and they've got they got it all. But those early years were tough, and they talk about traveling around and living in this van, which the Hulkster fondly remembers. He talks in that book also about how here he's got these big mansions and all this stuff, and come on, like, oh, I feel sorry for this guy, but he looks back and says, that was a simple life. We just we would go park on the beach And they had all these places that they liked to go, and they knew all the clubs, and they would just pull this thing up and put out the little tent, and hang out for whatever time they were doing and wrestle. And it was a simple life, but it wasn't easy. And of course, like Brutus, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's learning as he goes as well, and became a very good hand, as they say, in his own right. Now, of course, people credit Hulk Hogan for handing him a career, helping him along the way, and certainly who knows where he would have, if he would have ever gotten close to those heights on his own. But he knew what he was doing in there, and he did his own. They split for a while. He went out to the Pacific Northwest, and he worked out there. And then they both did a lot of work in Japan, and a lot of wrestlers will talk about that's where they really honed their skills, because over there it's a lot closer to a shoot to what they're doing, and it's much more they demand more skilled performances in the ring. And so Hulk spent a lot of time over there. At one point he thought he was going to stay there forever. Because he felt, over there he was respected, and he was revered, and he was an icon. And was this giant when he couldn't go anywhere. He was this massive star. But the point of it all is, those two paid their dues.
Yeah.
And for as long as it took before they really started getting noticed, that's what they did. They drove around, probably making enough for gas money and eat and camp on the beach. And hanging out in gyms and just getting bigger. Hulk, is very open about using steroids. Now, back then, it wasn't against the law, really. They weren't cracking down on people using steroids. So, you walk into a gym like, what do you want? There's always somebody there that could get you what you need, and became an expert at it. But it was all part of the business, and how he became this eventual phenomenon. But people really have to look into it. I mean, it's really an interesting story about how long it took. It wasn't just this overnight thing where like you said, it's just all of a sudden people look at this guy like, oh my God, he's a star. That's not the way it happened.
No. And again, we're bringing up, this is 1978. He doesn't win the WWF championship until 1984. So, you know what I'm saying? It's not like, again, people understand that Hogan was this phenomenon. Yes, he was years later, just like The Rock, just like Steve Austin, just like Bret Hart. It takes time to hone your craft and know exactly who you are. And while in the Memphis territory, he's being booked by Jerry Jarrett, Jerry Lawler. Hogan's dabbling in marketing and presentation and music. So he's changing up the fact that wrestling isn't just smoky halls. Let's dazzle this up a little bit from his bass player past. Let's bring in some music. Let's bring in some of that. But he's also, he made his debut as the Super Destroyer, and that's a gimmick that everyone seemed to love. You have Little Destroyer, Big Destroyer, Super Destroyer. There's just a bunch of those if you check them out. Even Andre the Giant at one point is a destroyer. Yeah. But he goes to Georgia Championship Wrestling, and this is where the name comes up. We had brought it up earlier. Sterling Golden. Now, if you saw Sterling Golden on a marquee, are you buying tickets for that? But he also worked with Stan Hansen, Austin Idol, Andre the Giant, and a very young Bret Hart here. Yeah.
No, that's I would even think when that working title, you could call it, wasn't going to something that was going to be big, but it was part of his evolution. And you mentioned Mid-South and people like Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler comes up time and time again.
Yeah.
About recognizing talent and people sending talent to him, because they know that when they go there, they're first of all going to be taken care of. Jerry Lawler had tremendous respect in the business, the industry. Jerry Jarrett as well. And I just had a conversation with Coco Beware, and Coco credits Jerry for helping launch his career. And so that was kind of like, if you get to that point, and of course, you got the big Emerald City on the hill with the WWF, with McMahon up northeast, and you're not ready for big time. You're not ready for the Garden or whatever. But if you're getting to Memphis, you're getting noticed, and they knew what to do with talent there. Time and time again, you hear about all of these guys. Hacksaw and DiBiase was down there, and Jake Roberts, and all these guys. So a great training ground. And, it wasn't going to be long. Like once Terry got there, and he, as you mentioned, he's experimenting, in reaction, I think is the best word to use. And unlike maybe many others who would get a reaction, like, the Hulkster or Sterling, whatever.
Sterling, please.
But he takes in that information and then knows what to do with it, and knows that, okay, when I do that, that's what happens with this crowd. That's what, and then being in different places and seeing the reaction and how it's different in this city and it's different in this town, and he's somebody who doesn't go past him. He takes it in, and it's also, taking a little bit from here and here. He's seeing guys cutting promos. Of course, superstar Billy Graham. I mean, come on, you can't not see.
Yeah.
And he's very open about, you kidding? I stole I stole a lot from him, but at the same time, he's making it his own.
Yes.
And it's developing. And you saw stuff like this. Reminds me of Randy. Randy the same way. That's what, you talk about these greats. They took a little bit of here, a little bit there, but then in the end, they made it their own. They made it unique. And this is what Terry was doing at the time, as he's developing.
Oh, yeah. And you can see superstar Billy Graham, you can see Dusty Rhodes, all inside of Sterling Golden, that is. But you brought up, once you end up somewhere, another company, another territory sees you. So in 79, we have Georgia Championship Wrestling. But in 1980, it's his first run in the WWF underneath Vince McMahon Sr. as a heel with classy Freddie Blassie as his manager. Now, again, his debut is December 17th, 1979. He's fighting Ted DiBiase, of all people, 50-plus Madison Square Garden appearances underneath this heel Hulk Hogan. Wrestled Andre multiple times, and I think that's where historians always get because WrestleMania 3 is brought up, and people are like, oh, it's the first time. Like, well, no, if you were able to watch beforehand in the 80s, you would see that they've worked together multiple times. But what'd you think of Hulk Hogan being a heel? Obviously, NWO version Hulk Hogan comes way later, but this version of Hogan, completely different package, and with Freddie Blassie as his manager, who was one of the best of all time.
No, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned Ted DiBiase, because as we should mention, and I talked about that, Terry didn't forget people that helped him along the way, and he returned the favor for many of them. Ted DiBiase is one of those. Ted talks about that story, that match. He came up, and he was supposed to put him over. And Senior goes says, I want you to do it. Ask Ted. And Ted is leaving. He's leaving the territory. That was a common thing. You would go places, then go away for a while. But as he's departing, Senior asks him, I want you to put this guy over. And, you can imagine Hulk was probably a wreck with this opportunity. And you're at Madison Square Garden, as you mentioned. Yeah. And Ted says, well, how do you want to do it? And then Senior says to him, I trust you. You do what you think is right. Now, Ted says that was a great tribute to him, that they trusted him, that Vince Senior trusted him to go out there. And it was a tremendous match. From all accounts, the crowd went crazy, and he really put over Terry. And Ted says, even when it was over, Terry, and I don't know the exact words, but told him, I will never forget, I won't forget this. And years later, when Hulkamania is running wild and Ted comes to the WWF, he didn't forget. And as you go back and look, all of those things, and not say Ted couldn't carry it, but some of that doesn't happen without Hulk telling Vince, yeah, I want this guy. So that was a great example of that. And it's hard to think about Hulk Hogan as the heel, but he became a tremendous heel later in his career. Had a whole other new chapter that just went on. So not really that much of a stretch. And he's a natural heel in a sense. He's this like big guy, arrogant. He could be, he's just full of himself, that he plays off, as we saw when he would get that chance with Thunderlips,
yes.
Which would launch him into the stratosphere. But they hook him up with Freddie. And I loved Freddie. I spent a lot of time with him. One of the greatest heels of all time. So if you're going to put somebody with him, not just to be this guy at ringside and be this, dastardly manager, but Freddie was a wealth of knowledge, of wrestling knowledge, where there was no better heel. There was nobody who knew how to get heat better than Freddie. Freddie Blassie was incredible and spent a lot of time on the West Coast. And I we spent a lot of time driving around and going to events and stuff, and I would just shut up and listen. Freddie had stories that were just unbelievable. And I mentioned what a heel he was, where fans were rabid, where he would have to be snuck into arenas and ambulances and that whole thing because people wanted to tear him limb from limb. He told me the story of he had this big, beautiful Cadillac convertible at the LA arena, and they would park the cars, right by the back doors there, and came out, and his car was destroyed.
Oh,
they slashed his tires, ripped the convertible top, and so there's no better heel that you want to hook up with Hulk Hogan. And whether or not Terry saw himself becoming this baby face or whatever, but you need to learn, you need to know both sides of how it works.
Yeah.
And so spending that time as a heel early on in his career was tremendous training for him. But when and then when you're on the other side as a baby face, because you understand the psychology of it. And Freddie talked about the time, they went the first time he went to Japan with him. And, and Freddie, oh God, the Japanese fans over there were scared to death of him. He would go into airports and they would be like these stampedes of people running from him. And he used to do the thing where he would file his teeth. He would put these things on these and file his teeth, just like crazy promos that he would do. And they were scared to death of him. And he tells a story that when they went to this arena and the place would be packed to the rafters. And he tells Terry, like, when you come out, like, scare him, do, like, go at him, like you're going to go at him. And Terry goes out there and he's like, like the people are freaking out. And Terry like starts picking up chairs and throwing them at him. He's like beaning these people and knocking them down. There's blood everywhere. And Freddie's like, oh, that's enough. That's like, stop.
You did your job. You did your job.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, but it is, and then they take it very seriously. Now it's and also the crowds are very polite, so they talk about how there's not a lot of noise in these arenas in many cases, so it's very difficult to read a crowd and reaction. But at the same time, it's brilliant because then when you see, it's like these subtleties that they would from reaction of these people. As I said, Terry would take this all in, and he's learning all along the way here. So having Freddie as a mentor was also a tremendous boost for Hulk Hogan. He was blessed to have been able to hang out with Freddie because I'm sure he learned a tremendous amount from him on the psychology of wrestling and on both sides of that spectrum. Because Freddie spent his life as a heel, but I'll tell you right now, man, he totally understood what it was to put that baby face over. So you have to know both sides of that coin. And I think, Terry learned a tremendous amount from him and during that period. And being a heel made him an even better babyface.
Yeah, I think people were shocked a long time ago when they found out Hogan had managers before Jimmy Hart. You're like, he had a manager? It was Classy Freddie? What? Yeah, Classy Freddie Blassie. Top of his game, because I remember seeing clips of him on even on Happy Days, and he would come on and I remember the scene that always show this, and the Fawn's even afraid. The Fawn's afraid of someone, and he's afraid of Classy Freddie Blassie just being there. So it was amazing to see. You brought up Japan as something too. In 1980, they do go to Japan, and they start working dates there, and Antonio Inoki's there, and this is where you see these videos pop up on YouTube or on Twitter or whatever, and you see Hulk Hogan, I guess, quote, wrestling, drop toe holds and arm bars. You don't see that in the rise of Hulk Hogan when he's fighting Earthquake and people like that. So it's interesting to see that Hogan's doing this, I guess, catch can style wrestling versus the punch, the kick, the point, the leg drop. And so but I think, are people shocked that Hulk Hogan actually knows the fundamentals of wrestling versus the sport entertainment side of wrestling?
Well, it's because he didn't have to here. Other guys have talked about that. Coco mentions that, early on when he, worked with Terry down in Memphis, that, he took him to a gym there. It was kind of, wasn't part of the arena or anything like that. And told him, because Terry wanted to do that stuff. He wanted to, do the drop kicks, and Coco's like, you don't need to do that. And it's going to extend your career if you don't, especially as a guy who weighs up, near 300 pounds and as big as you are. But when he was in Japan, and Andre, the same, people don't also, unfortunately, when professional wrestling was really at that peak and we had this mainstream viewership, that people were just totally into it, they saw kind of a broken down Andre, even in those early years. But, Lord Alfred Hayes tells me, Alfred knew Andre when he was 17. Yeah, that's when he first met Andre. And he said, you wouldn't believe this kid. I mean, he could move in the ring. And, Andre also credits, when he was in Japan, that they demand more there. You got to do more. But it's also this great place to learn. And imagine coming back, you bring that stuff to the States, you don't have to go to those extremes, and you just throw in some of that and you're blowing crowds away. And, if you ever get a chance to see some of those matches that Terry was involved in Japan, you're going to be blown away.
Yes, you are.
Because he could do all that, and he did learn all that. But at the same time, when he came over here, he didn't have to. He just do the clothesline, do the stuff that's going to keep you safe. Unfortunately, as we know, doing probably 1.5 million leg drops probably isn't the best thing for your back and your hips and other parts of your body. Yeah. But as far as the rest of it, he didn't have to go up into the top turnbuckle. He didn't have to drop through a cage roof to the floor. He didn't have to do that stuff. And it's people make a joke out of it. It's kind of the, this and this, but
it worked.
Yeah, if you were in those arenas, which I was, and it was just amazing. It's like they talk about people having a crowd in the palm of their hand.
Dude.
Hulk Hogan had it for years and years and years, and as I mentioned, that's just from having that understanding and how to control the crowd. And he was a master at it. He knew exactly what you needed to do in there. And change up when something wasn't working, and just knowing exactly what to do to get that crowd back. And I'm sure it's been studied by many, if anybody paid attention. that you would have learned a lot from him and how he controlled crowds.
True. Well, clearly his heel tactics with Freddie worked because Hollywood came calling. Sylvester Stallone sees him and says, "Oh my God, like I need you to be in Rocky 3 because 1 and 2 already came out in theaters, huge hits. Let's bring in this big guy to be this evil wrestling character in the movie." Well, Vince Sr., I think personally, and historians will probably agree, is Vince Sr. is like, well, I put you on the map here in New York City. I want a piece of that pie. There's friction, obviously, between promoters and wrestlers all the time. According to the rumors, Vince Sr. fires Hulk Hogan. Well, Hogan does. Rocky 3 becomes Thunderlips, huge hit, and then he moves over with Vern Gagne in the AWA. So let's break that down for a minute, though, because was it a mistake to fire a man who's about to be in a movie, especially Rocky 3? It's not like it's the first one, it's the third one because they're so popular.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because that Vince Sr. knew the business and was part of it for forever. Made his life really it, and not having that understanding, just saying, "Boy, this guy gets in this big giant movie. It's probably going to be pretty good for us."
Yes.
I mean, like what? And he's like, "Tell him, no, it's going to ruin your career." Like, what are you talking about? You mentioned that him getting that part, and it's Terry did not pursue that by any stretch of the imagination. Sylvester Stallone had seen him, and it was looking for someone to play this role. He wanted somebody that was going to be massive next to him, and Sylvester Stallone's not a big guy. I mean, he's a little guy. And you see that very clearly in the movie. They didn't have to really play it up. I mean, that was for reals. But the way Terry tells it, he initially thought it was a joke, and then had commitments to go to Japan, and was over there for a long time. And they're getting closer to where they have to shoot this thing. And Stallone is dead set. He wants Hulk Hogan. He wants Terry to be Thunderlips. And finally they get together, and Terry talks about how, he says, "I want you to do this part," or whatever. He said, "Let's go." I think it was in an arena, whatever. And they get in the ring, and Stallone's like, "Take me down. Show me what," like, Terry doesn't want to, hurt him or.
No kidding.
And he goes, "No, really, show me." And Terry blasts him. He hits him in the back or something like that. Stallone goes down, is like, "You're it. You got the part." but Stallone wouldn't give up. He just saw that this was perfect, and it really was. It wasn't a huge part, really. I mean, we think about it, wasn't like a main character move, but man, did people take notice.
Yes.
Of him in this, and really did. It had to be at some point that Vince Sr. was like, "Oh Jesus, I screwed that up."
Yeah.
Like, wow, oh, and he goes to work with Gagne, and that this is at the point where where Junior is starting to emerge as the next, the guy who's and he's just an announcer basically, and Dad's still in charge, but that Vince is thinking, yeah, this is, I know what I want to do. He's already got the vision, and then he sets his sights on Terry Bollea, and we know what happened after that. But it wasn't easy to get there. But man, when they got together, they both had the same vision, and made it work.
Yeah,
That's putting it mildly.
It's just shocking that you're right. Vince Sr., who's been in the business forever, understands how it all works. And yet, again, it's Rocky 3. It's not like it's the first one. You're like, oh, if you're in Rocky 1, it's going to ruin your career. There's a track record of this being profitable and being mainstream. This is free advertising. If you're in a movie, someone sees that, hey, I want to go see that person for real. Let's go buy tickets to go MSG or Boston Garden or whatever. It's just shocking. Maybe it's like he thought he could call Hogan's bluff. Like, oh, well, you're going to go do this? Well, I say you can't. only if you like maybe cut me in a little bit. And maybe that's the case. Is that what you think is like a buyer's bluff? Where you're like, I hope he's going to say no and then agree to my circumstances here.
I think what it really came down to is that, Vince Sr. knew he had seen enough people in the ring and their charisma and when they got it and got it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he knew very well that Terry Bollea did have it. And I think he knew that if he gets that exposure, it was going to cost him a lot of money to keep him around, or he was going to lose him. So that probably had a lot to do with it. I'm sure that you've heard the stories that he was pretty tight when it came to finances.
Yes.
And probably was hoping, if I can squash it and keep him here and make him, the threat of, oh, you really want to leave this org? We're the pinnacle.
Yeah.
And Terry's like, well, yeah, and believed him. At that point, Terry believed in himself enough to know he knew whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to succeed. And I think right after that, he went back to Japan before ending up with Gagne because he loved it over there. I mean, he made a lot of money. They worshipped him, took tremendous care of him. He met a woman over there that he talked about that, she was a beautiful Japanese woman and was thinking, this won't be a bad life. But then when it came down to it, it was, a foreigner in a strange land. And when it all came down to it, he missed being in the United States. And when he came back, he knew that he was going to work, and that's what happened. So if it wasn't for somebody by the name of Vince McMahon Jr.,
yeah.
Maybe it would have been, he would have been very successful in these other territories or whatever, but he was destined for far greater heights than that.
Oh, yeah. When he joins the AEWA, too, with Vern Gagne, he is a heel initially because Thunderlips is a heel. Let's bring in this character. Well, the audience is obviously interested in Hogan, so boom, babyface. This is when Hogan starts selling his own T-shirts out of his trunk.
Yeah.
And that is where kind of the argument of the Vern Gagne Hulk Hogan disagreements start because Hogan realizes merchandising. Like there is merchandising here. So I think Vern Gagne, as stories go, he wants, again, the same thing. Vern starts selling his own Hulk Hogan merchandise, but yet Hogan's not getting a piece of that pie. Vern Gagne is getting it. It's more of an opportunity. Hey, you're here. Enjoy the ride. I'm going to make money off of you, but enjoy everything. Is that just a promoter's thing where like promoters just go, well, like you're here, shut up, I pay you, do your job, leave everything else to me?
And basically I own you while you're here and I can do whatever you want. But as I've mentioned many times, these guys are independent contractors. They're on their own. And other wrestlers, realized their own appeal to these crowds. And the smart ones were, selling T-shirts and whatever. Mick Foley talks about that early on, where he would go to these places and he made more money doing that, selling his merch.
Right.
Well, Hulk Hogan was ahead of that game, and realized that that's a whole different part of the business that you should, and the boys should thank him even today for the deals that they have and the money that they've made from all of that merchandise. Mm-hmm. Now, it could be argued. Many felt that the Hulkster was selfish in that sense. Didn't want them to organize because he was going to ruin his deal. But at the same time, when it came down to it, was a reminder to everybody: look, this is just what the business is. You're on your own. You have to cut your own deals. You have to, figure it out. And he was aware of all this early on, and whether it was, like you said, selling T-shirts out of a trunk. But look what would become with that. I don't know if they ever kept total numbers just because of the age. I'm sure some of these new guys have surpassed that. But back then, when he was with the WWF, and I remember, God, we sold everything. They had merchandise with, the catalog.
Oh, I know the catalog.
The
Yep.
hats and the foam fingers and
Teddy
and the
bears.
Hulksters and the T-shirts and the ripped shirts that you could get. And Hulk was, tight with Vince there, and and knew his worth, and told him, "Hey, you can make some money too, but remember who's getting them to the concession stand there to buy this stuff, or going on and having it shipped to them, and I want my piece." And whether or not it was a selfish way of doing it or whatever, but it did pave the road for others, because when other guys got to that point where they had that leverage, they said the same thing, and then it became something for everybody. So whether or not his initial idea was to benefit all of the boys and the girls, of course, he's the one that they should thank you, because he definitely laid the groundwork for all of them, and then he got very rich from just that stuff.
Yes, even Austin 316, NWO, DX Ducket shirts, like all those people, all those shirts, those made a lot of people rich. $1 million checks cut every year because of your shirt. So yeah, Hogan started the merchandising. Obviously, merchandising is a thing that happened all the time, but yet out of his trunk, it's interesting to think it starts there. But they keep
early days.
They keep teasing he's going to win the AWA championship against Nick Bockwinkel. It never happens. He never wins the title. They keep doing this to keep bringing in people to buy tickets, hoping that he'll finally do it. So again, teasing. Hogan never gets the world championship. 1982, Rocky III comes out. Boom. Explodes. Huge success. Hogan's all over everything, so suddenly everyone recognizes him even more. He goes to Japan. He wins.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's funny about it, he doesn't even realize how big it was, right?
People are like downplaying it and be like, oh, yeah, you're in a movie. But he wins the IWGP championship from Inoki. Again, another fun fact about Hulk Hogan is like he's a champion, not in AWA, but in Japan, he's the world champion. That to me was just one of those weird situations. Like, what are you doing? Why are you pissing off your moneymaker? Because you think you can keep doing the old game of teasing a championship change and then getting people to buy tickets over and over again? I think that was a bad decision in my opinion. But for you, what do you think about always teasing an audience but never giving them the reward?
Yeah, that, love a good storyline.
Yeah.
But you better pay it off at some point. Otherwise, I'm out. You're going to lose me. And that's just bad booking. That's not, at some point you can drag it on. And you've heard stories where you get guys in there who are wrestlers and bookers, won't name names, but where they're always putting themselves over, and it doesn't go with the storyline. It's like eventually, like, come on, okay, you can't, because then you start going, well, I'm not buying this this pseudo reality you're trying to make me swallow, because you keep doing it and you keep screwing me. Yep. So yeah, at some point you got to pay it off, and at some point, whoever's on the other end of that is going to say, you know what, I've had enough, and I know what my star power is, and I'm going to go somewhere else where somebody's going to appreciate it.
Yeah, Rocky III just came out again, and then we no championship in AWA, but in November of '83, Vince Jr. contacts him, and we're off to the races. But Hulk Hogan, he decides to no-show the Christmas show for AWA. And around this time, in 1983, we have our first dip into the rock and wrestling connection, where Captain Lou Albano appears in Cyndi Lauper's Girls Just Want to Have Fun video. Mm-hmm. And again, another moment of wrestling crossing over into the other world. MTV, giant juggernaut, growing at extreme rates, and the youth, the kids are obsessed with MTV. So guess what? Kids convince their parents, give me your money so I can buy things, and we're off to the races. Hogan returns in the end of '83. This is the debut, though. Well, actually, back up. December 26th, Bob Backlund, who's been world champion for 4 years, loses to the Iron Sheik. The very next day, December 27th, Hulk Hogan makes his debut with, who's making his debut as well, Mean Gene Okerlund. So let's pause for a minute. Bob Backlund's been champion for 4 years. He just lost to Iron Sheik. Clearly there are plans for Hogan to take that belt now because Vince Jr. sees the popularity of Hulk Hogan and what he can do for the business. Cyndi Lauper. I want to give 100% credit to Cyndi Lauper for, if it wasn't for her and Captain Lou, I don't think we'd be in today's wrestling world. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I was living in New York City at the time, and was not really paying attention to professional wrestling. But when that all started, because I was totally into that MTV world, and everybody was, you had that in playing in your apartment 24/7. If you weren't watching something else, you had that on. That was brilliant. Because then everybody started recognizing this. You were these rock stars that were very popular, intertwining with these professional wrestlers, and they weren't your back carnival characters that from the old that you would see when you were a kid on those those wrestling magazines with all the juice and these were cool. These are cool characters, and they're buddying up to these rock stars. And so everyone took notice. And I remember, when WrestleMania, building up WrestleMania and all that, everybody was paying attention. And so in that sense, it was brilliant. But we should mention, Steve, though, that how we kind of blew past it, that, Vince convincing Terry to come in to the WWF. He wasn't in charge then. Senior was still there, had not really fallen ill at that point. He probably was ill, but I remember, I don't know if you ever remember hearing of a photographer, Steve Taylor.
Yeah,
was the official photographer for the WWF, and so the story goes that before Vince and Terry actually met to talk about him coming, that somehow Steve Taylor was at this event that Terry was at, and passed him a note. I just remember hearing, Steve telling the story that he passed him a note that, from Vince saying, I want to talk to you. And it wasn't like that. Everybody had cell phones or email or anything. And so there was this clandestine little, exchange. And I think Vince just wanted to know, is he interested in talking to me, and sent this note. And he told Steve, yeah, I would. I'd like to talk to him. And so I always loved hearing that, because, and I've mentioned before too. Yeah, I wish I would have known the Terry Bollea of that period, because when I came in, Hulkamania was already off and running. He was in the stratosphere. He was and he was impacted by it. He was affected by it, and who wouldn't be?
Yeah.
But I hear stories about him, as we've recounted already, of those early days, and how there were people that he, became very close to, and never forgot. They were always, in his circle. He had a circle of people that he trusted throughout his life. And I know, like Steve Taylor was, like his photographer. Gene came along. Gene can thank Terry for him coming to the WWF. Now, not to say Gene wasn't the most talented and greatest announcer. I sing his praises every time I get that chance. But would he have gotten the opportunity to come? Gene was his announcer.
Yep.
And Jimmy Hart and Brian Knobs and all these guys that he was loyal to throughout his career. And you hear that, like famous people, actors and musicians, that you get to a point where you are, so incredibly famous. Everybody just wants to be near you. Everybody wants to be your friend. You have no idea what their motives are. Most of them aren't real. They just want to be able to be near somebody who's famous. They grift. They're gonna, get drinks and meals and fun, and a lot of them who were genuine people, whatever, they they remember those early on in their life who knew them as this person struggling who was nobody. And that was that group of people that Hulk was loyal to for his entire life. I mean, I know that Gene and him used to have dinner when in Florida all the time. I mean, when they were both basically retired, or Gene was still working, but all that time he kept these people, Brian Knobs, all these guys would, when they had an event or whatever, Terry would make sure they were a part of it. Yep. Jimmy. Man, there's not a more loyal friend than Jimmy Hart, who would never say a cross word until his dying breath. He won't, because of what Terry did for him in his career.
Yes.
So, I wish I would have had that chance to know him. I'm not saying we would have been best buddies, but I would have known him differently. I knew him as this superstar who I got to do interviews with once in a while and had conversations with. But I know that those guys that were close to him knew a different Hulk Hogan than anybody else did throughout his career. And so when he got to that point and things really started to take off, who could fault him? I mean, it was no one could. He talks about being that rock star status. No kidding. I mean, like it was insane. But it was just amazing to see. But it wasn't easy to make that transition. Like to get, Vince Sr. was not about it. He was still about old school and didn't like the idea of Vince talking about taking over these territories and spreading out across the country and doing. He didn't want to hear that. But he was getting ill, and he knew that Vince wanted to take over the company. I mean, Vince, and he didn't give it to him. Vince had to pay for it,
yep,
and had to make the payments, and he did. But it would be a very, very different world. But Terry talks about how that early part of, as you mentioned, Backlund is the champion. He's like this plowboy, hick kind of all-American, whatever, just howdy doody in many ways, old school.
Very.
And he didn't want to lose the championship, and he was tremendously threatened by this guy. I mean, how could you not be? That Hulk walks into a room, that charisma just emanated off of him. But it was just a matter of time. But it didn't come easy, and Vince had to keep telling him. I think there were times that Terry was like, "Forget this. This isn't going to happen." And as far as me and Vince, because they both had this vision. And he talks about how that when they had that meeting and he convinced him to come over, that they were exactly on the same page. They all had the same ideas. And it's like, let's do it. And then you get there, and then you've got Vince Sr. like, no, not yet. No, yeah. And you got Bob Backlund in his ear. He's got that influence and holding him back. And finally, they couldn't do it any longer. And that's when things broke. And Vince Sr. became ill, and wasn't long after that it became Vince's company, and he was in charge, and there we go. So
true. And Bob Backlund holding on too is like he didn't actually lose. Arnold Skolin, who was his manager at the time, threw in the towel. So technically, Bob Backlund didn't lose. Arnold Skolin cost him the match. And even years later in '94, when Bob Backlund returned to the WWF, he blames Arnold for losing the title in 1994. And that's when he snaps and starts putting the cross-faced chicken wing on everybody and looking at his hands like a crazy person. So it really added that 10 years later, Bob is still pissed about what happened in 1984 with Arnold. So
I bet to this day, I think he's still pissed.
He's still looking at his hands, grabbing.
But he had a hell of a run too. So
oh my God, 4 years as world champion. Again, world title runs were completely different then than they are now. But then it was like, oh my God, you're champion for 4 years. Iron Sheik wins the championship, and again, I said December 26th. Iron Sheik beats Bob Backlund. The next day, you got Hogan, Gene coming in together. And you mentioned before in AWA, they were together as well. So this package has already been slowly being built. And now here they are representing each other. And as you mentioned, you got to interview Hogan a few times. Well, Mean Gene and Hogan, that was a package deal every time. Let me tell you something there, brother. Let me tell you something there, Mean Gene. Like, that is part of the essence of Hulk Hogan in all his interviews. So it was just great to see that he came into the WWF together on the same day. And they'll be attached at the hip on television until they're no longer on TV, even going to WCW together. So there's a lot there, but
that magic between them two, the two of them never changed either. You could just see it. I used to love it when I would be in that room there and the two of them would get together and it was just like, just magic. It was just go.
It's brilliant. Again, like I said, like all these little pieces that all line up to give us what happens on January 23rd, 1984. But you have Cyndi Lauper, Captain Lou, you got Hogan coming in, you have Thunderlips, like all these little bits and pieces all have to line up perfectly to give us what eventually becomes Hulkamania. January 23rd, 1984, Hulk Hogan defeats Iron Sheik for the WWF Championship. And this is one of those classic moments where you see Hogan backstage walking through the hallways of MSG, and in the distance, way on the back on the left side, is Vince McMahon Jr., and he barely turns the camera. He kind of just turns, and you see it, and people have brought it up for years, like, there he is. He's watching his magic. He's watching what he wants to happen right in front of us. Hogan wins the championship. Hulkamania is born in Madison Square Garden, January 23rd, 1984. It launches national exposure. It launches the rock and wrestling era. It launches everything to lead us into the stratosphere. So when Hogan wins the championship, without him, without Vince Jr., without all these little bits and pieces, do you think Hulkamania would have become this juggernaut?
Well, I think, eventually. At that point, it was destined, and Vince and Terry already had, they'd already seen this play out. Interesting to note that Terry in that match had heard rumors that they had reached out to the Sheik, these other territories, to hurt him, to do something to maim him, and was smart enough to realize that there was something special going on here, and probably wouldn't be a bad idea for me to be a part of it. Yeah, and gladly performed in that match to do what he needed to do. But it's you could think like a reason I bring that up is imagine even then when you've got all this going on. Terry's thinking like, man, I've heard like this guy that's how much you had to trust people in the ring, because, Sheik was certainly capable of it. If you know his history, he could hurt people. Let's just put it that way, if he wanted to. And so that trust had to be there. I'm sure it was kind of blind that day because he didn't know. He hadn't really worked with this guy and had a reputation, but that isn't what happened. And the Sheik deserves a lot of credit for helping for that launch pad, because he was the perfect heel for it.
Oh my God!
And played it brilliantly. And and as you said, off to the races.
$100,000 was offered to Iron Sheik to break Hulk Hogan's leg by Vern Gagne in this match, allegedly.
As the legend goes,
As the legend grows and grows and grows, here we are still to this day, $100K to break Hogan's leg to officially kill all the momentum that's building Vince Jr. and Hulk Hogan. So, you said it's interesting to see that like your enemies are trying to close in on you because they see how much growth that you have, and yet they're like, okay, well, how do we do this? Let's cut off the golden goose. But Iron Sheik, apparently, according to legend, told Hulk Hogan, hey, they offered me this to do this to you, I'm not going to do it. But yet, Iron Sheik's entire gimmick from 1984 until the day he passed was, fuck Pooey, that Hulk Hogan. He didn't like him, according to rumors, but apparently he did.
Hulk Hogan made him a lot of money.
Yes.
I don't think that was the case at all. He could appreciate that. But it shows you, that the business was cutthroat back then. I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of discussions with some of these promoters of saying, like, how do we get rid of Vince McMahon? How do we get rid of Junior? And I'm sure that there, I don't think anybody went to the point like, let's get a hitman or something, but they would have loved to have seen him have the brakes fail going down the hill somewhere, or and it was because they saw what he was doing. They saw the reaction. They saw that this wasn't just, business, somebody finding a new way to present their product. This was a revolution. This was changing the industry by day. This guy had the balls to come in. He's coming to territories. He's doing shows in their territories, the same night sometimes, and buying television time and putting on these shows in their territory, just basically saying F you. So there was, I'm sure there were a lot of discussions like, how do we get rid of this guy? Because he's ruining it for all of us. They like the mafia type territories where you had and you respected what that guy did, and we'll, exchange some talent here and help you out and you help me out. Then you got
don't cross the borders or we'll cut your brakes, man.
Yeah. So
it's going to break up.
Yeah. You can imagine they wanted him gone. And I'm sure that, it never really came down to it, but I'll guarantee you there was some discussions of violence that involved violence.
I agree. I bet that still went on for years and years and years. But I think once Vince Jr. bought everybody, it's like, well, what are you going to do? Come work for me, or are we going to crush you? And this is the birth of Hulkamania and the rise of Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon in the WWF all together. And this will be part one of a series of the rise of Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania here on Primetime with Sean Mooney. But I'm glad we got to dive deep into the person before he became this mega star. Sterling Golden and taking a chance on Thunderlips, traveling the country in a van with Brutus Beefcake. Little bits like that, I think, really show you that he's not a megastar at first. He's a person, just like all of us, trying to achieve his dreams. And he eventually does. And sometimes when you achieve your dreams, you have to do some things that you didn't think you were going to want to do. And we'll discuss those at a different date on a different episode. Before we wrap this up, though, what are your thoughts on the beginning and the molding from Sterling Golden to Hulk Hogan?
Well, I want people to appreciate what that trail to Hulkamania. It was not an overnight happening. It took years, and getting into a business where nobody wanted the guy, and yet he wouldn't quit. He knew he had something, and he paid a big price, but wouldn't stop. And so most people just know the Hulk Hogan who was Hulkamania and this mega superstar. Mm-hmm. But, he was a human being just like everybody else, had his failings early on, had his doubts, the obstacles that were put in his way to try and stop him. And he was going to persevere. And regardless of whatever you think of Hulk Hogan in the end, you got to respect him for what he went through and what he did for the industry.
100%. Well, thank you everyone for being here on the rise of Hulkamania right here on the Primetime with Sean Mooney channel. I'm C-Fall. He's Sean Mooney. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
It's the golden age of WWE. Larger than life of fantasy. Step in the ring, feel history.